Everyone said hello. Okay, let's get on then. So this came from, for some of you, if you follow me on Facebook, you will know that I have had the absolute privilege of doing 4 massive conferences recently. And the most recent one was the GP National Conference in Rotorua, which is about 3.5, 4-hour drive away from me. Anyway, pottering around the exhibition stands like you do, I came across this drug company that just kind of thrust this paper in my face. Now, you could so take offense at that, couldn't you? It's like, what, you're calling me fat?
Sorry, could you hold it up again, please?
Oh, jeez.
Off, isn't it?
It's a bit rude.
It's a bit rude. Anyway, me being me, I made some sarcastic joke about that. It meant we built rapport really quickly. And I got talking to the sales rep. It's, as I said, drugs company. And she then said, oh, you must look at my questionnaire, and gave me, in the end, a whole pad of gut questionnaires. Wow. Let me just read a couple of them out to you. When I crave something, I know I'll not be able to stop eating once I start. If I eat what I'm craving, I often lose control and eat too much. I feel like I have food on my mind all the time. I don't think I even got that far down, and I'm going, have you heard about the gut brain? And all of those questions I felt could be re-asked without food, which got me really curious about cravings across the functions of gut. And interestingly, hearing you guys already, we've had safety, security come up, we've had identity come up, right? So I started to kind of go, I think there's something in there. I have no research to back it up that it does extrapolate out to the other functions, but I've had a play with it, and that's what I wanted to share with you tonight. So this is me being rampantly curious, proposing some ideas, and I'm happy for you to go, oh yeah, but no, but you haven't thought of this. That's absolutely fine. But let's see where it's gone to at the moment. And you'll see one of the models, it was just like, seriously, how can you not know about the gut brain when you're presenting this? Because it's obvious. So let me share my screen with you. I've made about 6 slides, I think, just to kind of give us something to look at so that you know what I'm talking about when I talk about the graph and the other bits. And let me put you up here so I can see you all still. There we go. Okay, so can you see that all right? Gut Precision Coaching. That was a really cheeky name that I kind of came, again, extrapolating from there, the personalization of obesity management. So we talk about the gut brain, and we are a little bit guilty then of acting as if there's a gut brain, as if everybody's is the same. And the fundamental part of this paper is that the reason we're so rubbish at treating obesity is because we're treating everybody as if they've got a gut brain rather than the individualization of that gut brain. And I went, I ended up speaking to this lady for about an hour. Anyway, she says, moving on. So the first thing that it got me curious about was if there's an individual nature characteristic of the gut, what influences, what are all the variables? So I came up with these, and this is not research based either. Remember, this is just me being rampantly curious. I might be wrong. If anybody, you're happy to take photographs, Helen, for sure. If you want the slide pack, no, absolutely fine. If you want the slides, just let me know and I'll send them over. So this is my musings at the moment of what possibly might be that individual.
Yes.
Oh, not quite sure who that
is. Please.
It sounds like a bot voice. How bizarre.
Yes, please.
Or an alien coming in.
Yeah, an alien coming in. Miriam, this is you jumping in full force with AI, isn't it? Let me just confess. Okay, so the first few I took off the paper, which is what they said is affecting the individual nature of obesity. So genetics, right? There's going to be a genetic mix to that. Get curious then. Genetics about identity, genetics about safety, genetics about taking action or not taking action. Curious. Environment. Anyone who's done my Embraining 2.0 course or been curious about following where that's gone, one of the big shifts that I've done in my work is said it's great what we do with looking at the individual multiple intelligences, but none of us sit in isolation. And so whoever we are in connection with, that also impacts us. So we need to look at social connection, and we also need to look at environment. And that led me to think, well, toxins is another obvious one in gut in terms of what toxins are we taking into the body. Anyway, you can read down the list. As I say, I haven't done loads of research behind each of these. This is just me going, if I were going to say, you know, there's Miriam, there's me, there's Michelle, there's Shelley, there's Faye, I'm just going across the list. What makes us different at gut level? Why is anatomy and physiology not just the same for everybody? What's your thoughts of any of those? Any you go, oh yeah, that's obvious, that's got to be on the list, or any you go, actually, I don't agree, I don't think it should be. And what else is not on the list that I haven't thought of yet? Because there might be others, I'm sure there will be others. And I'm going to get a piece of paper, because any you add, I will then add into the slide pack once. So talk to me.
Do you want thoughts now or not?
Yeah.
Physiology. The actual structure of the gut.
So anatomy. So anatomy is structure, physiology is function, both of which I think are absolutely valid. And clearly you just can't see they're written at the bottom of the list. Because they're blimmin' obvious, and I didn't have them on the list. Yeah, I agree. Anatomy. Some people are born with different anatomy. Some people, who is, hey, was it you? Was it you? No, it wasn't. It was Colleen. So Colleen and I had a conversation yesterday. I thought she might be here today. Anyway, she was saying she's got a client at the moment who has had a large piece of her bowel removed. Mm-hmm. And she's now coaching her, and they're struggling to get a good kind of gut communication going. Interesting that, isn't it? And on one of my Australian coach certs, I had someone up for a demo, and note to trainers, take a little bit more history before you bring a demo subject up. Again, we were struggling to get a communication from gut at all. And eventually I must have asked some ambiguous wide question. Is there any reason why your gut might not want to speak to us? And the guy said, well, I had my appendix out 2 weeks ago. I'm in a bit of pain. And
that was like our training.
Yeah, we were there.
Yeah. So just to prove I'm being honest. So anatomy is an absolute valid one, right? Because there might be all sorts going on that is physically affecting either the structure or the physiological and function. And if Sue, don't put your hand up, just shout out.
No, you're talking, but I'm just flagging up that I want to
no,
add something that's been parasites.
Parasites, absolutely.
I'm currently in a few groups, and it's amazing how many people have said how much their anger and various other emotional states have changed since they've done detoxes on parasites.
Interesting. I did have microbiome in there. I don't know if any of you were watching Sarah Otto's microbiome. I don't know what she called it. She didn't call it a summit, but effectively it was a summit. She had 10 hour-long video webinars, one a day. And in each of those, there was maybe 4 or 5 experts who were talking about a particular thing, one of which was leaky gut, one of which was inflammation, one of which was immunity. So yeah, it's parasites. Spot on, Sue.
I was thinking of trauma.
because it really affects your gut personal experience. Yeah.
Did you see how many gaps there are in my list?
Yeah.
Which then also makes me think inflammation. Medication. Infection, medication.
And adding on to the trauma stress,
Mm.
which is
Yeah.
as you speaking to someone with ulcerative colitis, which
Yeah.
you helped reduce massively when we first met on the ambit
Can I say?
coasters.
So there's all sorts of questions that arise out of this for me. One is, on your intake forms when you're doing clients, how much of this do you ask for? Because we're going to jump in and we're going to ask for gut communication.
I've actually got one more.
Yeah.
Addictions. I've just done a sugar detox. Mine wasn't a drug or whatever thing, but different type of drug. I've done a sugar detox.
Yeah.
And I'm sure my gut's different now, and my communication, I can actually tell when I'm hungry now without it specifically having to ask my gut, whereas I couldn't before.
Wow. And that's leptin ghrelin, right? That's, we often lose touch with the ability to say we're full, or the real ability to, like so many of us, partly because we're so privileged in how we live, we never get to the point where we're really hungry. So ghrelin is, I have a very simplistic mind. Ghrelin starts with GR, grumbling. So it's like ghrelin is the one that allows you to pick up the grumbling tummy that says you're full. Leptin, which is the other one, is the one that says you're full and stops you eating. But there's like a 20-minute gap.
Yeah.
So there's quite a significant time gap between what you've eaten and being aware of the leptin at full pelt saying you're full. So often, again, because we often eat so fast, we often carry on eating beyond we're full because we haven't yet heard the signal, even if we ever hear the signal. Some of us don't, like, you know, that wasn't an individual confession, although, as you know, somebody stopped me and asked me if I need obesity drugs. So can you see how I started to get excited about this?
Yeah.
There's one more. One I was thinking, allergies. So,
Yeah.
or how that all links in with beliefs and protection mechanisms of the immune system and inflammation, and it all starts to link in together. However, that whole, well, then, in fact, looking at it from MBIT as well, the lack of congruence between the communication between all the brains.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we've covered it, but I just think in the moment emotions as well. We've talked about trauma, but I think there's in the motion and stress, but there's in the moment emotions definitely, in my experience, affect my gut.
100%. And what we say is that although emotions are normally at heart level, if they become extreme emotions so that they become identity, they drop to gut. So I feel anger, but rage, I am full of rage, would be drop into gut. So I now have more on my list.
Sense of smell as well.
Sense of smell.
Suzanne.
Yeah, smell. I'm just laughing because you've put way more on the list than were on my initial list, right? So thank you for that. Shows my complete lack of preparation for this session, but that's okay.
Not at all.
Oh, it gives us a chance to actually provide some input.
Yeah. Oh, you can always put input on, you know that. But yeah, so there's a massive number of variables that potentially not only make my gut different from your gut, but actually make my gut different this week from last week or last month. And how do we, as a coach, coaching to gut, how do we accommodate for that? How do we, as I say, one obvious thing is on your intake form, how much of that information do you ask for when you're doing that first kind of clinical history do you take time to ask that sort of thing? How far do you go? How deep do you go? And it's going to be, it's not, I don't think there's a right or wrong, but make a conscious choice for yourself. Whereas I think maybe up until now, we haven't really made a conscious choice. We've just kind of gone with it as if, well, the gut's the gut. It's this tube that, you know, goes from your mouth to your bum and everybody's got the same. Maybe not. Okay, so, and that was only the introductory slide. Are you glad you came?
Sorry, I've got another one.
Oh, go on.
Teeth and mouth.
Ooh.
I've just had tooth abscess.
Yeah.
And functional medicine person has put me on an amazing probiotic kind of regime for my mouth. So, and specific toothpastes, and that's why I was late, really. It takes bloody ages. But that having then obviously going all the way through.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, gum disease in particular has a massive hit on cardiac health, if you weren't aware of that.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move you on, otherwise we're going to run out of time. They came up with, see, they are just playing at the corners compared with what we've come up with. But for their precision medicine, they have largely split people into 4 phenotypes. So 4 types of different people. And one is, let me get this right so I don't mislead you. So one they call satiation or hungry brain. Second one they call hungry gut. So hungry brain, head brain, hungry gut, second one. Emotional hunger, well, we're kind of familiar with that. We kind of talk about that a bit in the coach set. And then slow burn, which is low energy. And what they're saying is that you've got to know what phenotype somebody is in order to know what intervention to jump in with, because the interventions will be completely different. So let me just give you their little sentence. So the hungry brain, head brain, satiation is knowing when the meal is over. This phenotype eats more calories at each meal than the average person. So basically you don't get that leptin signal. You don't know you're full. You keep on eating and you're consuming more calories. The hungry gut, or being hungry, is about the ability to not eat between meals. This phenotype feels hungry in a relatively short period of time after eating a meal. So this is like my son as a teenager. He'd have a roast meal. Next minute, he's in the cupboard looking for food. Doesn't do it anymore. Okay. Third one, emotional hunger, much more kind of, they call it hedonic eating, eating in response to negative and or positive emotions. This is the phenotype most typically associated with obesity. And then low energy or slow burn, an abnormally low basal metabolic rate and low overall activity level. This phenotype doesn't burn sufficient calories. So whatever you eat, you're not burning it off. So that was their 4 key phenotypes. And I thought I'd share that with you just to show where they were at. And I think I'm right in saying the next slide. This is the graph they come up with. So these
Can you be a blend of those then? Is that what this is?
Yeah, so their study was based on 450 people. You can see the percentages in each and then the percentage blends. And then you've got 15% who weren't categorized, that they couldn't work out which one it was. So they sit outside of that graph completely. I'm guessing for us, if we stand back big picture, the numbers are not hugely different across those 4. So you've got 16, 18, 12 and 12%. So it's not like you can say the vast majority of people coming into your room are going to be emotional, you know, hunger. There's an even split across the 4. So that raises some questions for me about calibration. How do you know which one they are? because the chances are, pure probability, the chances are it could be any of the four, because there's a relatively even split. So what are we calibrating for? Would you calibrate it? Knowing that now, would you change what you calibrate? How else does it extrapolate out? So if I go back to this and we start to begin to say, what if this is not just about food? Hungry brain might become, she says, translating as we go, knowing, so it was knowing the meal's over, knowing enough's enough. Not being pushed to that more and more and more pattern, a bit like Liz and Rory said about craving not to crave.
Yeah.
How many people have more than enough but still crave more? The hungry gut, the ability to not eat between meals. This phenotype feels hungry in a relatively short period of time. Is this your addictions? Is this your adrenaline seekers? So they go and get something, but it's not enough, and they have to do it again really quickly and do it, you know, raise the bar. Emotional hunger, eating in response to negative or positive emotions. I think that one already sits within our realm of what we do, so I'm not sure that that needs changing. And then slow burn. I started thinking about things like burnout, overwhelm, dorsal vagal and polyvagal, not having the ability to. So you might want something at heart level, but your gut just has not got the energy to take action on it.
Yeah.
What thoughts go with those four now that we've semi-translated them beyond food?
What's comes up for me is seeing the patterns there. The hungry brain potentially could be this cephalic brain, wanting more for some reason. It's feeling in lack. The emotional hunger is what I see is the heart being in lack, wanting to feel better. Hungry gut essentially is the gut, like you say, being craving impulsivity or and the slow burn to me sounds like it's metabolistic, so that's potentially breathing patterns. When breathing too fast, it gets rid of too much CO2, and then there's or not. How do I put it? Yeah, so it's a metabolistic thing. So there's an actual the oxygen and the glucose aren't working well together, and the CO2, there needs to be enough CO2 in the system as well.
Yeah, as you're talking there, Rory, I'm also thinking about energy homeostasis, allostasis, which comes in with ANS. And the bigger control center of, not only what you focus on, but have you got enough in your system to deal with it? And if not, how do you redirect things to rebalance that? Being sarcastic, maybe the 15% unknown is pelvic in some way, and they just haven't worked out what the pelvic hunger is.
My wondering was more if we understand. I was wondering, Suzanne, that basically if we understand that 80 to 90% of communication anyway starts from the gut, and we mentioned bacteria in the gut, the parasites. So could it be that eventually the head brain is reacting to the communication from all the entities within the gut? So the thinking about the food is eventually triggered by the enteric brain, like the gut itself. And could it be like so much somehow in control that it triggers the communication and can justify it as an emotion, or I don't know. I'm just thinking that when you think about food, I really feel that it's initially coming from a craving in the gut, like in the digestive tract.
Yeah.
That something is craving. And then you can rationalize it in your head that I want chocolate, I want salt, I want biscuits, whatever that is. So how would you, let's say, in the graph that they had, I keep thinking that the emotional hunger and the hungry brain are just are sort of justifying the hungry gut. And then eventually the slow burn could also be linked to many things like hormones, your, I lost the word in English. You know, some people have Hashimoto's or they have some issues in their, yes, so basically somehow a lot of other factors, not directly related to your head brain as the head brain deciding and making decisions. It's like I feel the head brain in this instance is just reacting to everything happening in the body and deciding, okay, that's what I'm craving, that's what I need to do to support the system. Well, whether that support feels positive or negative or results in something more useful to the body, on the longer term, that's something else, right? But at the moment, the gut is inflated or my hormones are all over the place. So the head convinces me that this is what I need: salt, sugar. I don't know.
Fascinating. I honestly don't know the answers here, but just listening to you talk, a few things come to mind. One is, while we are taught that 80% of the information of the vagus nerve is afferent, it is still bidirectional. And so I think fundamentally it can work both ways. So you could think yourself into wanting food, or you could feel you're hungry. I think it could come from either way. And which one you use more probably then kind of gets a stronger neural pathway. The other thing is, it's very easy or easier to stress down to the body than to parasympathetically calm down to the body. And digestion is in parasympathetic. So I think I could convince myself at head level, I really need that chocolate bar and I really need it now. And the fact that I've just thought it almost sets up the physiological response that I start to taste it and imagine. And that, I mean, that's what we do with hypnotherapy, isn't it? When we test how hypnotizable someone is, you start talking about cutting a lemon and you see whether or not their mouth starts watering. So I think we're way more bidirectional than we maybe give it credit for, and way more connected than we maybe give it credit for.
I'm wondering where habit comes in. Like, for my own personal experience with my sugar detox, for me, it was honey in my tea. That was where I had the bulk of my sugar coming in, and then just the convenience foods and condiments and things like that. As far as a day-to-day thing. And so you take a break, have a cup of tea, have a squirt of honey in it. So it's not actually, and maybe a biscuit with it, but it was more the honey. I hardly have any cups of tea now, like 3 a day, 4 max, compared to I probably was having 8, 9, 10, because it was the honey hit I was seeking. And I think that was probably more a habit thing, which makes me think it was hungry brain. You talk yourself into taking a break, I'll have a cup of tea and then do something else, compared to how we've described the hungry gut.
Yeah, and again, my favorite answer to any question is it depends.
Yeah.
You describe your way of habiting beautifully, and I would be absolutely sure that you're right, and that you know your body, and that it was a habit. But other people, they will take in sugar, and that sugar will give a very short-term nice feeling dopamine hit. And so it will come, the urge to do it again and to have more will come from gut. So again, that bidirectional, it could be either. However, I think it's a really good conversation and great question to start it off, Dima, because knowing what it is for your client is key in terms of what interventions you might do to break it. Because if it's a habit, a literal neural head-based habit, that's going to be very different than if it's a dopamine hit effectively from a quick sugar rush. Because the risk of dopamine hits, that's back to your addictions again, is that you need more of it to get the same hit over time. So what used to be a piece of chocolate becomes a line of chocolate, becomes a whole bar of chocolate to get the same response. And you know, when you have that, it gives you that good feeling. And so there's like a fake reward, if you like, short term. And pleasure is a short term. You're not in the moment, you're not necessarily thinking beyond to meaning, purpose, and bigger picture. You're just thinking of that moment. So your intervention might be about how do you effectively dissociate from that moment of pleasure and become more aware of my big purpose is actually to, you know, release 30 kg and be fit. But in the moment, the dopamine hit will be driving the now pleasure short term. Very different than changing a neural pathway, like a straight habitual. Fascinating, eh?
Suzanne, I'm also intrigued that if they were to ask these questions of people that believe we have more than one brain, the answers would be very different, because the interpretation from that questionnaire is people think they only have a head brain. So they're going to give the meaning that their head brain has worked out. I'm really surprised the emotional hunger brain here isn't hugely higher.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if the reason for those, I mean, I would relate to the 10 cups of tea a day. And I don't drink, and I get the dopamine hit, but I know that there's a comfort that I get from that, and it's very little to do with the tea. So, and that has huge impact for how we can support our clients as therapists and coaches. It's phenomenal. I'm also, you know, they also need to, I'm not a researcher per se, but, you know, it's just, it's predominantly white females.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, and it's based on a BMI, which there's some critique about whether BMI is the best measure of obesity. So it's almost like I wanted to share this with you because this is where it came from. But having gone from there, I've almost left that aside and gone, what does this mean for us, for whole gut? That I haven't got research. I can't tell you figures. I can't say it definitely is. But everything in my gut says, I think this extrapolates out to the other functions in the gut. And just to get rampantly curious about it. And maybe, I don't know, maybe start to hear different things when people are talking now. And for me, I think that the absolute biggest thing was the individualized nature of it, even within the silo of the gut. Helen, don't wave at me, just shout at me.
I was quite interested by the slow burn. And I just, I mean, what I wrote down was, is that about exhaustion and then the lack of capacity to act?
So let me just
or being in parasympathetic state.
Low basal metabolic rate and how overall activity level does not burn sufficient calories. That's their official definition of the slow burn.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that for a lot of the stuff, for the other factors, it's pretty much in the moment. But with the slow burn, could it be kind of the legacy of trauma, the legacy of high stress, the having been in a situation for a very long time, and whether that kind of exhaustion, lack of capacity, you've got nothing left to give.
No, and both and, because if you get to the point where you've got nothing left to give, it could be chronic. In the moment, does it really matter whether it's chronic or acute? You've got nothing to give.
Yeah, which also goes back to the knowing enough is enough.
Yeah.
And getting to the point where your head, and I see this, you know, in the adoption world with parents who are parenting, you know, children whose behavior is appalling and violent and you know, and actually that, when do they, and I observe, you know, when do they get to enough is enough?
Yeah.
And
if you come up with an answer for that, let me know, because I'm just doing a new piece of work about letting go. So I think there's a whole thing about
we'll have a separate conversation, Suzanne, but
yeah.
it is the boiled frog thing, isn't it? You put a frog in boiling water, it jumps out. You put a frog in cold water, heat it up, and it stays in there and dies. Now I see that second situation with people quite a lot, and I don't know, that it's just that whole concept has just jumped out at me, actually. And thinking about, you know, when Dima was talking and she said, sorry Dima, I'm just going to talk about you here, and you said it felt shallow but you wanted a holiday, and actually my reaction was whoa, you know, this is absolute the self-care that's necessary after trauma recovery, blah, 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 and how important that is, and well done for spotting it.
And how wise when you're in ongoing trauma, like how often when you're still in the midst of it do you have the wisdom and the courage and the bravery to go, actually I need a break. We hang on and hang on and hang on, hope we're still alive at the end of it, and then maybe have a rest.
Yeah.
Dima, we're talking about also, you. Feel free to come back in. Oh, Sue, go on.
And also grief.
And grief, yeah. All these big, long, chronic ones. Burnout, overwhelm.
Absolutely.
Bullying, grief.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yep.
Which comes back to my...
And that what Helen mentioned about the frog being in water and then it heats up, and literally it feels exactly like that. That you get used to it, and used to it, you don't understand how it's been really, really, really like squeezing the life out of you. So
yeah. Becomes the new normal. How many clients? Who's got clients for whom? I mean, this is my bias, right? But stress. All my clients come with stress and anxiety. So many of them have carried it for so long that if they even get the thought or the question to imagine what it would be like without it, it's scary.
Mm.
Who would I be without it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't even imagine it. And if I do imagine it, it's too scary. I've literally got a 23-year-old at the moment who I've got to the point with him where he is now aware he's holding a belief that if he lets go of his behaviors, he's more at risk. Well, go figure. He's not going to change his behaviors, is he?
Mm.
Yeah.
But at least he's aware of it now. Interesting.
I guess this links beautifully to what you mentioned, Suzanne, at the beginning in your Embraining 2.0 about the environment.
Yeah.
So
100%. Yeah. I think, I mean, you know, well, yeah, I now have, I don't do embraining anymore, you know that. However, I use multiple intelligences and I use them in a very different way. And I cannot imagine not looking at the wider environment, wider spiritual as part of that. Okay, moving on, because otherwise we're going to be here till midnight. So this is my attempt, and I'm sure you would come up with better ones, but this is my attempt at rewriting the questions so that they're not food related. So they're exactly the same questions, except that I've taken the word food out. If you want to have a quick go at doing this for yourself, so you all came with a craving, that was what your craving was. If you were to take that craving through this questionnaire, and you're then scoring each one at 6, where, you know, 1 is the low end of it is never a problem, and 6 is always. So I just give you a few minutes to whiz through that and come up with a score. So the top score is 90. So just add up what you come up with. You're getting down. Anyone still going?
Yeah.
I could have been cheeky and said, don't think about it, just go with your gut response, but that would have been really cheeky. And then if you add them up when you're down to the bottom, just quickly add them up. Obviously, the lowest score is 15, where you score 1 in everything, and the highest score is 90. And the obesity questionnaire, it says if you get more than 50, then you need to get help. Now, remember, we haven't done the research on this side of it, so I can't say for sure it's 50, but it certainly gives you a bit of an objective marker for, is this a craving where it is a problem, that it is like it's driving behaviors, it's everything that Liz and Rory were kind of bulking against at the beginning, that need to, that, you know, unhelpful drive craving. Because craving is maybe not, it's certainly not a word I use a lot in my language. But when I read some of the questions, I was going, oh, actually, maybe I do. Anyone want to comment, share anything about?
Well, first thing I'll say is it comes back to what your normal response. It depends. There's number one. Could be fooding, could be knowledge, and there'll be different answers. Yeah,
I agree. I think it's got to be specific. So you pick a craving and then answer it for that craving. And it would be at that point in time, in that context, and it could change, you know, yeah. So reliability may be an issue, absolutely. And I'm not saying go and use it. I'm just saying I thought it was a really interesting chance conversation.
I'm just wondering if that questionnaire might actually help you decide what type of craving it is, like what we were just looking at, the previous slide, whether that might help.
I'm sure it does. What they cheekily say on the bottom of their question, because this is a drug company, right? So there's vested interest, is one, the score needs to be calculated by your doctor. Why? Do they not think we can add up 15 times 6? You know, it's like, but clearly they're trying to put you in, you know, having a conversation with understands their little graph, their model, and their drug,
their product. Yeah, exactly.
Product. Absolutely. So it is all, it's, if you want to know the name of the product, it's called Contrave. So it is product related, which is always a little bit biased. So I'm not promoting the product. I'm not promoting any, you know, in terms of this is not a validated questionnaire. This is me playing with a validated questionnaire to be curious about whether or not it would be useful as a, if you've got a client who has got either lots of gut issues. So medically they say, oh, actually, you know, I've got a guy at the moment, 62, massive anxiety, and has got so many gut issues, he couldn't even remember them all to tell me them, kind of thing. Would it be something that would be useful to sit and go through with him so I could get a sense of his phenomenology of it? How are you doing gutting? And therefore, what might we look at, or what we might even communicate with, really? Because I'm guessing where in the gut you might communicate would change depending on what comes up. And also opening up the possibility that it's not food related at all.
I want to disagree with you to start with.
Feel free.
On the basis
and then I'll just eject you from the room next time.
Absolutely. Yeah, no change there. I think that I didn't actually, because my sort of original thing didn't fit, and I just kind of went, okay, I'm just going to go through them as a and I did it as a what am I like in general in life with these, and I got answers, and I thought, oh, that's interesting, and that in itself was interesting. And then if you could then subsequently drill down, so you've got that global thing, and then drill down to specifics about, I don't know, you could do it for sleep, you could do it for eating, you could do it for a whole, how does that relate for your family or whatever. So you start drilling down, which I think could really help clients, and we're all clients, aren't we, to see how we are acting in the world. So I think it actually is a really, really useful personal development tool. I think this has got far more implications and far more use than at the moment, Suzanne Henwood, you realise. Okay. Yeah. No, seriously, I mean, you look at some of the questionnaires that are out there, and you think about how some have, just got global recognition and people, and yet they're not potentially as useful. Well, yeah, some of them are not as useful, but I think you're onto something here.
Well, I took the literal, this was about food cravings and obesity. So I took it to the next logical step, which is interesting because that's head, but the next logical step was about across the gut prime functions. And I restricted it to that for the moment. Whether or not it has wider applicability than that, I don't know. I can't even say this is valid. Like, I haven't done the research on this to say it's valid. But there was something about it that made me think there's something in this that's worth playing with to get this far. And I will keep playing. But I thought it was worth bringing it to you guys, who are always the ones who show up, who always contribute, who always have great ideas, to go just check outside yourself for a minute. Just get another view. So it's certainly something I will keep playing with. Rory.
What's coming up for me is I really, found it fascinating, and it's really, really like Helen's saying, it's there's something really there, I believe, that can really help get valid information for people to understand their own cravings, as you say, and so also the whole quantitative style of questioning is, I feel, very limited when it comes to emotions and things like that. So all I'm saying is that when we do the assessment of a client in the coaching, we're looking for themes, as in qualitative results, or not results, but information. And so that is, for me, qualitative research is always going to trump when we're going to talk about emotions and health and people related stuff, because however the quantitative approach is still really valid for getting a sense of honing in on something in much more detail. So you get more detail here, but the detail is still subjective. So it's I think it's what can be working well is to work both together.
I agree wholeheartedly. I'm a qualitative researcher, so I'm with you. I laughed when you said, qualitative takes trumps. Yes, but I've done my life in healthcare where quantitative is the only one that's considered. So I've had to play the game across both. And I still work in that space. So I still work a lot with GPs. I still work a lot within the kind of wider health field, where they will really appreciate having some quantitative measure. And some clients do too, in terms of convincers for how do I know something's changed? Because once something starts to change, a bit like your boiling frog, that becomes your new norm and you kind of forget the problem that you had. So my intake form has quite a quantitative questionnaire within it about how is life for you. And that's both stress and anxiety and mental health. And I get them to do it at the beginning and I get them to do it when they leave me so that they have an absolute measure. Is it absolute? Does it actually measure? No, not really, but it's a good convincer. And I think the same might apply here. And I totally agree with you. If you took some of these and made them conversation starters, rather than a measurable objective questionnaire, that would also be really useful as well.
Suzanne, can I ask a different question? This questionnaire and the people you were speaking to, they are manufacturers of a drug which is focused on obesity and managing cravings. Am I simplifying that enough? Is that basically what that's about?
Yeah, kind of. But what their unique selling point, which they claim nobody else does, is that they break us into different phenotypes so that it is unique and individual. How they can say that when it's only 4 subtypes, but there you go. That's their selling point, is that they are assessing you individually for how your gut functions and then determining the treatment pattern according to that, which is not normally done in obesity, apparently, which is quite surprising.
The treatment pattern all relates back to this drug. Am I right? Here, take this drug. It doesn't matter what the reason is that the cravings are occurring.
Not quite. Not quite. To be fair to them, and I don't see why I have to be fair to a drug company, but there you go. On the back, I don't know if you can make that out. I haven't put this in. Is there's a little table that basically says which phenotype are you, and then what the diagnostic tests would be, and what would be the best interventions. And no, they're not all, because if you look at, here's emotional hunger. The top intervention for emotional hunger is behavioral therapy.
Okay.
So yeah, it's not all saying, therefore go and take my drug. I think what they are probably doing is separating out who the drug would be best for, i.e. it probably doesn't work across the board on all 4 types.
No.
So work out which type it is, and of those types, these, so hungry brain and hungry gut are the ones which they seem to be saying. Let me just read it as take-home messages. Obesity is the #1 chronic disease in the world. A one-treatment-fits-all approach is not working. Obesity is complex and heterogeneous disease with multiple phenotypes. Phenotyping patients with obesity doubles weight loss and facilitates personalized interventions involving diet, lifestyle, and pharmacotherapy.
Yeah, I hear that, but I think I'm really simplifying this, and it's just the way my brain's going. Just to finish the thought, irrespective of the reason for the craving, if a drug is an intervention, it's addressing it from, and this is so obvious, but it's addressing it from the input end of the mouth, basically, shutting down the craving using a chemical intervention makes almost 0 sense. It doesn't matter why, it just makes no sense because it doesn't address anything else, and it doesn't train the person who has this challenge, doesn't educate them, doesn't train them at all. It's a crutch, which in fact is quite destructive. So
I mean,
that's obvious.
I'm not defending them. However,
I don't know. I get that.
And say that the top row, which has got the most in it, is lifestyle and behavioral. And that seems to be more quantity of how can you treat this than the others. But you're right, underneath that, there are the drugs, a range of drugs. I'm presuming they make all of them, but different drugs for different phenotypes. No drugs, interestingly, in slow burn. Slow burn doesn't get any drugs at all. Which is interesting.
Probably more lifestyle or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Aware of the time, and I know this end of the world, it's quite late. So I just want to leave you with this one. Is it serendipity? Is it coincidence? I don't know. I have just read this book, The Upside of Your Dark Side. If you've not read it, I highly recommend it. It's a really good book. And in the middle of that, because it was talking about hedonic pleasure, there was a whole thing about hedonics, which comes out of Richard Kraut's work. And this is the bit that kind of got me. So it's getting what you want and pleasure that comes with that belief. So remember what we said earlier about the pleasure being in the moment, which also comes out of this book, and the dichotomy between pleasure and meaning being generally either future focused or past focused, whereas pleasure is in the moment. So there's a time dependent nature on it. It's getting what you want and pleasure that comes with that belief. That's what hedonia is. So the result, the kind of, why are we craving something? We're craving it because we think it's going to get us, it's going to make us feel good, basically. But it's not just about whether or not it's going to make us feel good. It is also about whether we believe it will make us feel good. And if you've ever done any work on stress has the same thing. Whether or not something is stressful is impacted by whether or not you believe it's going to be stressful. Same thing with pleasure. I'd never heard that link before, so I thought I would share it. What else was there? Not to label things as good or bad, resourceful or useful in the moment. So even the word craving is a label. If you're not going to label it craving, how do you have the conversation? What are you talking about? Striving was another word that was in it. We need both. We need the kind of long term and the short term. How do you get both? And then I started kind of posing questions in my head. Where do we get meaning and pleasure? So if they're the dichotomy, if pleasure is the hedonic pleasure, but there's meaning as something longer term or past tense, where do you answer for yourself? If you feel like you want to journal on it, where do you get pleasure? Where do you get meaning? And if you go multiple brains on that, we would put meaning at pelvis and pleasure at heart. How do you get both? How do you get them to talk to each other? And how do you bring in that time component to it? Let me just leave you with a quote. True happiness, this is from the book, true happiness must be more than fleeting feelings of pleasure. So heart alone's not enough then. You've got to go into the gut, you've got to go into the being, and you've got to go into the pelvis to get meaning. And if it's not integrated with both gut and pelvis, it's not true happiness. Ooh. According to the book. I didn't say that. So who's it by?
Yeah. The author. Please.
Can you read that? No.
Oh.
Todd Kashdan with a K, Kashdan. What a set of names. And Robert Biswas Diner. Sounds like some dodgy cafe. Biswas, BISWAS -DIENER. Not sure if you can read that.
Thank
And
you.
what's the book called again, Suzanne?
The upside of your dark side.
Oh, okay.
I've been doing lots of work around shadow and a lot of reading around shadow, and it is the best book I've read so far out of about 5 or 6.
Lovely. Thank you for
Really
sharing.
lovely definition of wholeness.
I love having somebody who does all the reading and then just tells me the highlights and the best
It's like
bits.
ChatGPT, isn't it?
Are you calling me a geek as well as fat?
You're my fat geek friend. Yay.
Outrageous. Right, let me stop sharing. Let's come back to all being together. Comments. There's no conclusion, right? I have thrown you some rampant curiositying that I've been doing. What are your takeaways? What, comments? Was it useful? Is it something you might go and pursue?
Definitely, Suzanne. It's very useful. I will definitely use aspects of this in a questionnaire. How can we leave it out? And when I heard you say the possibilities, my brain, I was thinking this has so much more than possibilities. For me, it was like, how can it not go across all of the prime functions? And so even that second questionnaire that you layered, your first change of looking across the gut prime functions was fascinating. But even that felt limited because there's so much more to this. And also with the picture, I would personally, that might be the psychotherapist in me, I would have moved the emotional aspect of that to the center of that screen, the circle. The Venn diagram, for me, the emotional bit would have been in the center to recalibrate that. Absolutely fascinating. So useful.
Yeah, see, in their center was the people who have got all 4 components. So as a typical Venn diagram, it's like you've got some that have got 2, some that have got these 2, but in the middle, that small percentage, I can't remember what it was it 9% or something? In the middle, who experience all 4 of those, which is another kind of whole question, because if someone's doing all of those things, where do you start? And the reality is, certainly lots of my clients have complex systemic issues going on. And there's no simple flow chart, right? There's no like, do this, do that, do this. It's yeah.
Yeah, fascinating, actually. So many layers to our lives. I'm in the moment letting go and decluttering. And I found my gut is really talking to me. My whole body is talking to me. So it's like all the emotional, the physical, because I am just, stuff is leaving the house. It's like entering another, reinventing myself. But my whole being is, so we're all multi-layered, and whatever is going on, there's always the underneath layer for everything.
And that systemic nature, that you change one little bit. So Shelley, you spoke about your name. Miriam, you've just spoke about letting stuff go. You change one little bit in one segment, and it is going to impact all the others. So it's like you have to let it jiggle and then reassess.
Yeah.
So maybe call me hypocrite, I don't know. My last client who came, this 62-year-old guy, on the chemistry call with him, and he's got a psychiatrist, he's got a psychotherapist, he's seen other coaches, he's desperate for change, but clearly there's something stopping him. And I said to him, if you're coming to me thinking I have a magic button that you can press in one session, I'm not the right person for you. This is about you getting to know your system, about working with every part, you doing behavioral changes, because if you don't do the behavioral changes, nothing's going to change, and then us reassessing. Lo and behold, he had his first session. The next day he's ringing me, goes, I still feel anxious. Do you remember that conversation we had? you've been doing this for 55 years. He had a trauma at age 7. I said, you've been doing this for 55 years. Your neurology is not going to rewire overnight. Every time you have that anxious thought, you need to interrupt it. Every time you interrupt it, you then need to flood your system with positive alternatives. And you have to keep doing that every time a thought comes if you want to change this. Now, that goes against some modalities who claim you can do quick fix. The more I am going into the complex systemic embodied nature of this, the more I'm moving away from those quick fixes.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely.
So it's interesting. Okay, so if you didn't get an email,
can I just challenge that?
Yeah.
In particular with trauma, if let's talk single incident, if you can melt a single incident trauma, which I do believe is possible, that is an instant fix. However, it is then all those connections that go from it that can take the time. But it's like you've just, and so the systemic change is taking longer. So that for me is a reframing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But probably not the systemic change.
Go on, Shelley.
Probably not the systemic change is the thing that takes longer, but finding all of the things that you need to put that systemic change onto.
And reliving life, because you change one thing and other things changes and you've got to learn how to be again. I don't disagree with you, Helen. However, I would never say to a client, I can do it quickly. I've done a randomized control trial on height phobia. I've got the research. I can show you in quarter of an hour, we can get rid of her height phobia. Does it sort everything out? Maybe, maybe not. But I would never and never say to my clients now, I can do quick fixes. And I would say to them that, you know, once you change one thing, other stuff shuffles, and you've got to relearn how to be you without that. And that will create its own little challenges. And
I think that's a brilliant message. And I agree with.
It's a bit controversial, you know, to some modalities. I won't name them and shame them, but there are some modalities that I am qualified in that would disagree with me, and that's okay. It's not what I sell. Anyway, so couple of bits. One, if you didn't get an email with the date from me, it means you're not on my email list for this Global Wisdom call. If you want to be on that list, make sure you email me with your email details. If you are not on that list, you will not get the email with the recording details. So, you know, I'm not going to use it as a sales pitch or funnel. It is literally just for these calls. But if you want to be on that list to get both the dates and the recordings, then obviously I need to know where to send it. So that's one thing. Two is on the last call, we did betrayal, and Lisa and Lawrence, who I'm guessing are still listening in, suggested that we do suffering for the next call with the American dates. So the next wisdom call will be on suffering. I have no idea what we're covering. I haven't even begun thinking it through yet. Or I'm hoping with betrayal, what we did was we just I happened to find a few memes around betrayal, and it generated the most beautiful discussions. I'm hoping that if I do a quick search, I'll find a few memes on suffering, and the same will happen, that we will just have a beautiful discussion around it. And then beyond that, I don't know, I'm half from the conversation with Colleen yesterday, I'm wondering whether it's time to do a couple of case studies and actually bring some of these real life cases, you know, forward. She said she'd be happy to talk about her lady with the gut surgery. I'm always happy to talk about any of my clients. So we could do a bit of a session on literal session, as I'm saying, what are we doing in practice, which might be different from the script that we've been given, because we're all so well qualified in other woven techniques. And although we're all MBIT, this is now a wider global support call than MBIT. And so, you know, we might get other people beginning to join in that maybe haven't got MBIT. And we'll just talk about multiple intelligences, and they can share whatever their coaching approaches are. So just to let you know, that's kind of where I'm heading, is widening this out. So if you know anyone who is a coach who wants to be part of these calls, do feel free, let them know about it. And again, if they want the dates and the recordings, they just need to let me have their email addresses. Okay, so let's go round. One big takeaway in relation to your craving that you introduced yourself with at the beginning. I will jump in. Mine was traction. Takeaway for me on that is to get really specific about what that is and where I'm holding it so that I can work with it. Who wants to jump in next?
I might go in because my little dog's letting me know that he wants his dinner. Sorry, you can hear the barking from downstairs. Mine was clarity, and doing the questionnaire was very interesting for that because identity is sort of woven into that as well for me, because I've had a very broad background through my career. Yeah, so I just found it really interesting, and I did do a screenshot of that questionnaire, so I'm going to look at that a bit deeper.
Yeah,
So
if anybody wants those slides, just email me and I'll flick you them across.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. So I'm going to head off. So great talking to everyone tonight. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Right. I think I was craving not to crave, and I noticed when I did the questionnaire, I had a bit of a feeling every time the word came up. Yeah. I was like, I want to change it to desire. Anyway, so I did write previously, if I am craving, it's craving rebalancing, you know, repurposing purposefulness, meaning. And these connections on here are part of meaning.
Nice. Yeah, interesting response to the word crave too.
Yeah,
might be worth feeling into and exploring, because desire, more likely to be heart, crave is God.
And Suzanne, I don't know if I received an email. I'll definitely email you. I just got this on the MBIT Facebook group, as always. So in case that goes down, I don't know what's going to happen with that. What is the date of your? Well, I'll get that if I email you today. Okay.
Yeah. So the on my page, Embraining for Success, is the little image with all of this year's dates.
Yeah, and that's, yeah, okay.
So they're all set, so that won't go down. But you know, and if there's a problem at any point, just email me. But yeah, I have now created a little list. So I have been emailing that out in advance just to say, hey, look, here's the dates, or this is the topic for this month, or a reminder, or yeah.
And how great, fantastic, we can open this up to other coaches as well now.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Traction. Because, spoiler alert, the new decision-making questionnaire is this close. And I know I keep saying that, but I can tell you now, hand on heart, last week, I saw a live version of it being used and generating the report. It now works.
Hey.
So there was a few little minor bits where text kind of drifted, and there was a couple of font issues. So they've gone to rectify those. They should be ready very soon. Sarah and I will then do a whole raft of fake IDs, basically, to generate a load of reports and just check that it works across, because it's so individualized. We want to make sure it works across a bulk of them, and then we will go out for beta testing. So I know I've been saying for a while it's this close, but it is really, really this, it's like so damn close. I've now seen it working, and it just looks freaking amazing. So because of that, that has no limitation in terms of who might use that. It's nothing to do with embraining. It is people being human. So it could be anybody. Could be
Suzanne, is that the brain preferencing questionnaire?
It's what used to be the brain preference questionnaire.
Oh, okay.
Which, just to put a mark in the sand, and I won't go into it in too much details, I own that questionnaire. Grant gifted it to me when he died.
Yep.
It is being claimed that's not true, even though I have emails from Fiona that acknowledge it was gifted. But, you know, the multiple brain questionnaire, anyone really going to question that was my work for 7 years? Publications with my name on?
So just to be clear for us, the decision-making questionnaire that's so close is what was the brain preference questionnaire?
Yeah, except it's had another 4 years work put on it. So to give you a bit
Mhm.
of, again, spoiler alert, to give you an idea of what this is freaking amazing, what is coming out, right? It not only does 3 brains, it does 5 brains.
Yeah.
It not only gives a brain score, it gives right down to prime function scores.
Oh my goodness.
It then also talks about if you're a high head and you're a high heart, how do you talk to each other? How do you communicate? And what's
Amazing.
the professional development of, so if you've got a low gut score, how do you increase that? So it's a 58-page report. It's in a different league.
So, Suzanne, that craving that I didn't want to crave, I can feel a craving for this.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Who else? Checking out. Craving.
Me.
Takeaway about your craving.
Me. So my craving was for freshness, and my takeaway is knowing when there's enough of that.
Ooh. Yeah, nice. Nice. When's enough? When's enough enough?
And what happens after that? Once things aren't fresh anymore, how do I know when it's not fresh? And then what?
Yeah. Yeah. You might start craving something different.
Mm.
Beautiful.
Yeah, my takeaway, I suppose, is trusting my gut and just listening to it and responding.
Yeah, nice.
My takeaway is my craving for slowing down is actually a need. I need to slow down, and it's actually a craving to keep doing. That's the issue. So, and the thing on the different gut, what was it? The slow burn.
Yeah.
I realized that is what's kicked in my system since I had my accident. And that's the reason why I haven't been able to shift the weight, even with all their drugs and everything like that, because obviously they're not actually targeting what's the problem. And I think that that's linked back into that constant doing. So that's being that sympathetic constant like this, and then the bounce back that's keeping me in that cycle. So slowing down and just allowing my nervous system to sort of come back into regulation is potentially going to help some of that other issues that are going on with my weight and other things, the tiredness and stuff that's coming from all of that.
Yeah.
So that was my takeaway.
What a beautiful insight. Because now you've got something you can do with it.
Well, now it's got something I can work on. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And I'm already taking next week off, maybe even the next couple of weeks off. So it's sort of re-emphasizing that that's really important,
Yeah,
and
beautiful.
for me not to break that.
Beautiful.
Also, you're with an MBIT coach there. You could just take that up the roadmap. Present state, craving to all this doing, desired outcome to slow down. Well, let's explore that block, shall we?
Oh, we could. We could.
No pressure, Shelley, but you know.
She's easy to coach anyway. She coaches herself.
Yeah, most of the time. Or coaches Shelley, or we coach each other. It's a lot of coaching going on.
Anyone else? Quick, gonna check in, check out.
What I'm noticing is, craving, not craving, is for me to be mentally rehearsing, not being attached to the craving when it comes up, and practicing what I can be impulsive instead of craving.
Nice. And everything in balance, right? Because instinct, which could be impulsive, isn't always accurate. Intuition usually is. It's a bit slower. Nice.
I guess for me, and thanks for Helen to bring me up as an example, is really respecting. And I think when it comes to respect, I'm using this word because sometimes, a lot of the times, I dismiss the signals as let's say, I give the preference more to what is right, and that's definitely the head telling me what's right. I guess I'll just start planning this trip. Might join you, Wendy, let's see. But thank you. I realize that there are cravings that you just need to immediately acknowledge, otherwise burnout will be, and maybe a bit of depression. I started feeling some things like not wanting to leave the bed, things that are giving me basically like a sign that things are not going okay, so I need to reconnect to myself and to my gut.
Yeah, and when can cravings be positive? That's a whole nother session.
True.
Mine was productivity, and I've written down crave, desire, need, want, and all of those on a simplistic level are the same, and yet they are so very different. So I've been wanting to write. I'm not sure if I'm craving to do it, but if I translate it to a desire, it just feels a lot softer. And want. So I am going to play with that linguistically and in whatever, and that obviously, connects in lots of other ways. And also, I'm going to say, coaching self is great, but having a good coach who spots your blind spots. I am very good at self-coaching, which means I am very good at not noticing my blind spots. So it's reminded me that actually it's time I reconnected with my coach. So I will do that.
Yay.
Has everyone checked out? I think they have. Awesome. Okay, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for being as excited about this topic as I was, because I felt a little bit geeky, but it just hit something in me that I thought, this is something I've got to share quite quickly before I'd done too much work on it, and just kind of put it out there, even though I knew it wasn't perfect yet. So yeah, really glad you got excited about it as well. Good old GP conferences. Take care of yourselves. If you need a rest, have a rest. If you want to chuck some more clutter out, chuck some more clutter out. Stay in touch. Be real. I am so sick of fake. Be real, show up, and look forward to next time. And if you want to come for suffering, that sounds awful. If you want to come to explore suffering, I don't know what that's going to look like yet, but you know, it's always a great session because you guys show up and we have great discussion. So my absolute privilege to happen to host this. 10 years now it's been going, and I know I get out of it probably more than you guys do. So thank you so much for showing up and contributing and being you, because you're awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you very much.
See you. Bye.